I sat at the polished mahogany table as my parents' attorney read grandfather's will. My sister Caroline got $12 million cash. My parents smiled and nodded approvingly. Then the attorney looked at me. And to Donna, I leave my personal effects and photographs. The room erupted in snickers. My mother Patricia leaned over. Maybe now you'll learn to earn your own money instead of expecting handouts. Then grandfather's private attorney, Mr. Harrison, stood up from the corner. Actually, there's a second document. The conference room in downtown Chicago went completely silent. Mr. Harrison walked to the front of the room, his shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. He pulled out a sealed envelope from his briefcase, the paper thick and cream-colored with my grandfather's wax seal still intact. This document, Mr. Harrison said, breaking the seal, was entrusted to me 3 months before Mr. William Thompson's passing. He instructed me to open it only after the primary will had been read. My heart pounded. Caroline's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the table. My mother sat up straighter, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to confusion. Mr. Harrison adjusted his glasses and began reading. I, William Henry Thompson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my granddaughter, Donna Marie Thompson, the controlling interest in Thompson Manufacturing and Holdings. This includes 51% ownership of all business operations, including 3 manufacturing facilities located in Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, the commercial real estate portfolio consisting of 17 properties, and all assets associated with the Thompson family company. The words didn't register at first. I stared at Mr. Harrison, waiting for the punchline, the catch, the moment when everyone would laugh at the elaborate joke. The estimated current value of these holdings, Mr. Harrison continued, is approximately $80 million. Caroline's chair scraped against the floor as she shot to her feet. That's impossible. This is fraud. She must have forced him to write that. My mother's face turned the color of a tomato. This will be contested. My father was clearly not in his right mind. Donna manipulated a dying old man. She always was sneaky, always hanging around him, whispering poison in his ear. My father Richard sat frozen, his eyes calculating, doing math I couldn't begin to understand. I couldn't speak. $80 million. The company my grandfather had built from nothing, starting with a single machine shop in 1972 and growing it into a manufacturing empire. He was leaving it to me. There's more, Mr. Harrison said, holding up his hand for silence. Mr. Thompson included specific conditions that must be met for the inheritance to be transferred permanently to Donna. My stomach dropped. Miss Thompson must successfully run the company for 1 full calendar year, beginning immediately. During this year, she must increase company profits by a minimum of 10%. She must accomplish this without financial assistance from any family members. If she fails to meet any of these conditions, the entire estate, including the $80 million portfolio, will transfer to Caroline Marie Thompson. Caroline's husband Brad, a corporate lawyer with slicked-back hair and a shark smile, leaned back in his chair. His expression transformed from panic to cold calculation. 1 year? She'll fail in 3 months. Then we get it all. $80 million plus the $12 million Caroline already received. My mother's panic turned to a slow, spreading smile. William always did have a cruel sense of humor, setting Donna up to fail publicly. How fitting. Mr. Harrison pulled out another sheet of paper. Mr. Thompson also included a personal letter to be read aloud. He cleared his throat. Donna, I watched you build yourself from nothing while your sister lived off handouts. You put yourself through community college while working 2 jobs. You never asked me for a penny, even when I knew you were eating ramen noodles for dinner and walking 3 miles to save bus fare. It's time to show everyone what you're really made of. But you must earn this, just as I earned everything I had. The company starts generating reports tomorrow. The clock is ticking. Make me proud. Love always, Grandpa. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people. Caroline slammed her hand on the table. This is insane. Contest it, Brad. Contest it right now. Brad was already on his phone, probably texting his law partners. "Don't worry, sweetheart. She'll never make it. The company's been struggling for months. Uncle Frank's been telling us all about it. She has no business experience, no management training, nothing. She'll run it into the ground, and then everything will be ours. We just have to wait her out and maybe give her a little push in the right direction." The way he said push made my blood run cold. Mr. Harrison handed me a thick folder. "These are the company documents, access codes, and keys to your grandfather's office. The board meeting is scheduled for Monday morning. That gives you 3 days to prepare. 3 days. To somehow figure out how to run an $80 million company. To increase profits by 10% in a market I knew nothing about. To do it while my entire family waited, hoped, and apparently planned for my failure." I stood up on shaking legs and took the folder. The leather was worn smooth, the same folder my grandfather had carried to every meeting for 30 years. "The deadline is exactly 1 year from today," Mr. Harrison said quietly. "Good luck, Miss Thompson." As I walked out of that conference room, I heard my mother's voice behind me, sharp and cold. "She won't last 3 months. And when she fails, we'll make sure everyone knows it was her fault, not William's senile mistake." I had no idea how right she would be about the timeline. But she was wrong about one thing. It wouldn't be 3 months until I failed. It would be 3 months until everything got so much worse. 2 weeks later, I sat in my grandfather's office at Thompson Manufacturing headquarters, surrounded by financial reports that made my head spin. The mahogany desk that had seemed so grand at the funeral now felt like a barrier between me and a company bleeding money from a dozen different wounds. The previous manager, my Uncle Frank, had left the books in chaos. It took me 3 days just to understand the filing system, and what I found made me sick. Missing invoices, unexplained transfers, quarterly reports that didn't match bank statements. My grandfather's assistant, an older woman named Dorothy, who'd worked for him for 25 years, knocked on my door. "Miss Thompson, the production manager from the Illinois plant is on line 3. It's urgent." I picked up the phone. "This is Donna Thompson." "Miss Thompson, we've got a problem. Jefferson Industries just canceled their contract. That's 40% of our Illinois facility's orders. They said they're concerned about management instability and want to wait until things settle down." My hands went numb. Jefferson Industries had been a client for 18 years. Did they say who they spoke with about their concerns? Some lawyer named Brad Davis called them last week. Apparently, he suggested they might want to reconsider their contracts given the upcoming changes in company leadership. Caroline's husband, already making moves. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll handle it." I hung up and immediately started researching Jefferson Industries, their needs, their pain points, what we provided that they couldn't get elsewhere. If I could meet with them, maybe I could salvage the contract. But before I could finish my notes, Dorothy buzzed again. "Miss Thompson, there's a situation in accounting." I found 3 of our senior accountants in a conference room, their faces grim. "We need to show you something," the lead accountant, a man named George, said. He pulled up spreadsheets on the projector. "These are the real numbers. Not what Uncle Frank reported to your grandfather in his final months, but the actual financial state of the company." The numbers swam before my eyes. We weren't just struggling. We were hemorrhaging cash. How long has this been going on? At least 2 years. Frank was covering losses, moving money between accounts to make the quarterly reports look better, but the underlying problems never got fixed. Quality control has been slipping. We've had 3 major recalls in the past 18 months. Customer satisfaction is down 30%. I felt like I was drowning. Why didn't anyone tell my grandfather? George looked uncomfortable. Some of us tried, but Frank controlled access to him in those final months. And honestly, Miss Thompson, your Uncle Frank had your mother's backing. Anyone who pushed too hard found themselves reassigned or let go. That night, I worked until 2 in the morning, creating a recovery plan, implement new quality controls, personally visit every major client, Streamline operations, cut waste. It was possible. Difficult, but possible. I fell asleep at my desk and woke up to my phone ringing at 6 a.m. It was my boyfriend, Jason. Well, the man who used to be my boyfriend. "Donna, we need to talk." His tone said everything. I'd missed his company dinner 3 nights ago because of a crisis at the Wisconsin plant. I'd canceled our weekend plans twice. I'd been so consumed by trying to save the company that I'd barely seen him in 2 weeks. "Jason, I know things have been crazy, but once I get this stabilized..." "That's the thing, Donna. When will it be stabilized? You've changed. Everything is about the company now, about proving something to your family. This isn't the life I signed up for. I have 11.5 months left. If I can just... 11.5 months of this. Of you working 20-hour days, of canceled plans, of you being stressed and exhausted all the time. I can't do it. I'm sorry." He hung up, just like that. 2 years together, and he couldn't wait 1 year. I didn't have time to cry about it. The board meeting was in 3 hours, and I needed to present my recovery plan. The meeting was brutal. 5 board members, 3 of whom made it clear they thought my grandfather had made a terrible mistake. They questioned every part of my plan. They demanded to know my qualifications. One of them, a man my grandfather had trusted for 15 years, actually said, "With all due respect, Miss Thompson, running a manufacturing empire isn't something you learn from watching YouTube videos." But I held my ground. I presented the numbers, the plan, the timeline. 2 of the board members, at least, seemed willing to give me a chance. That weekend, I went to my parents' house, hoping to reason with my mother. I had evidence now. Proof that Uncle Frank had been embezzling, and bank records showing transfers to both my mother and Caroline. Over 2 years, they'd taken nearly $2 million. I thought, if I showed her the evidence, if I explained that I could send them all to prison but was willing to let it go if they just stopped sabotaging me, maybe we could find peace. I was so naive. My mother opened the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Donna, what a surprise." "Mom, we need to talk. Can I come in?" She led me to the living room where my father sat reading the newspaper. He looked up, his expression unreadable. I laid out the documents on the coffee table. Bank transfers, emails between Uncle Frank and my mother discussing how to hide the money, forged invoices. "I know what you did," I said quietly. "All of it. The embezzlement, the stolen money, everything. But I don't want to destroy our family. I just want to be left alone to run the company. Stop sabotaging me. Stop telling clients to leave. Stop spreading rumors, and I won't press charges. We can all walk away from this." My mother looked at the documents for a long moment. Then she looked up at me, and her expression was pure ice. "Richard, are you hearing this? Our daughter is accusing me of being a criminal. She's threatening her own mother." My father frowned. "Donna, these are serious accusations." "Dad, it's all right here. The evidence is." My mother's voice rose. "How dare you? This is what happens when someone gets a little bit of money. They become paranoid. They turn on their own family. You've become obsessed, Donna. Obsessed with that company. Obsessed with money. Obsessed with destroying anyone who questions you. That's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to. Get out." My mother pointed at the door. "Get out of my house." "Mom, please, just listen. Get out." I gathered my documents with shaking hands and left. I didn't realize until later that she'd recorded the entire conversation on her phone, her voice rising, sounding afraid and defensive, while my voice stayed calm, making accusations, threatening legal action. She had exactly what she needed. 2 days later, I was served with a lawsuit. Patricia Thompson and Caroline Davis were officially contesting my grandfather's will on the grounds of undue influence and elder exploitation. They claimed I had manipulated a dying man, isolated him from his family, and coerced him into changing his will. The evidence? My mother's recording of me threatening her and making wild accusations. Character witnesses who would testify that I'd kept my grandfather away from the family in his final months. and a restraining order claiming I'd threatened both my mother and sister. Brad was running the entire legal strategy. And the judge assigned to the case? An old college friend of my mother's. Everything I'd tried to protect, I'd just handed them the ammunition to destroy. The lawsuit became public within days. The local business section ran the headline, "Thompson Manufacturing Heiress, Accused of Elder Manipulation." I sat in my office, staring at the article on my computer screen. They'd used an old photo of me from Caroline's wedding, where I looked tired and disheveled. Next to it, a picture of my mother looking elegant and grief-stricken. The article painted me as a manipulative granddaughter who'd taken advantage of a dying man's weakness. It quoted anonymous sources saying I'd isolated my grandfather, controlled his medications, and whispered lies about the family to poison his mind against them. None of it was true, but lies printed in newspapers start to look like facts. My phone rang. Another major client, Stevenson Corp., calling to postpone renewing their contract. "We have to think about our shareholders," their CEO explained, his voice apologetic but firm. "With the legal uncertainty around Thompson Manufacturing's ownership, we can't commit to long-term contracts right now. Once things are resolved, we'd be happy to revisit." Once things are resolved. Code for once your sister takes over. That made 2 of our 3 largest clients gone. The third, Morrison Industries, was scheduled to meet with me next week, but I already knew what they'd say. Dorothy knocked on my door. "Miss Thompson, 5 employees from the Wisconsin plant just submitted their resignations. Effective immediately." 5? What happened? I'm not sure. But they all cited hostile work environment in their resignation letters. Hostile work environment. I'd visited that plant once, had a perfectly professional meeting with the staff, and implemented some basic safety improvements. How was that hostile? Later, I'd find out my mother had paid each of them $10,000 to quit and file complaints. She was systematically destroying the company's ability to function, while making me look like an incompetent tyrant. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I had to appear in court and explain to a judge why I shouldn't be legally barred from contacting my own mother and sister. Mr. Harrison prepared me as best he could. "They're going to paint you as unstable, aggressive, and obsessed. We need to show the judge that you're rational, calm, and that your concerns about the embezzlement are legitimate. But the judge is my mother's friend." "I know. That's why we filed a motion to recuse her. She should never have accepted this case given the personal connection. But until that motion is heard, we have to proceed." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. My mother and Caroline sat on the opposite side, both dressed conservatively, both looking like victims. Brad sat behind them, whispering strategy. The judge, a woman named Sandra Williams, looked at me with obvious disdain from the moment I walked in. My mother's lawyer, a man named Frank Garrison, presented their case. He played the recording of my visit to their house, carefully edited to make my accusations sound unhinged and threatening. He called the conversation harassment and intimidation. "Your Honor," Garrison said, "Miss Thompson has become increasingly erratic since inheriting control of her grandfather's company. She's made wild accusations against her own mother, threatened legal action without basis, and caused severe emotional distress to both her mother and sister. They fear for their safety." "That's absurd," I whispered to Mr. Harrison. "I never threatened anyone." "I know," he whispered back, "but the recording makes it sound bad out of context." When it was our turn, Mr. Harrison presented the evidence of embezzlement, bank records, emails, transfer documentation. "Your Honor, Miss Thompson's concerns are not wild accusations. They're based on documented evidence of criminal activity. She has every right to confront her mother about theft from the family company." Judge Williams barely looked at the documents. "Mr. Harrison, we're not here to litigate embezzlement claims. We're here to determine if a restraining order is warranted based on threatening behavior. But the context matters, Your Honor. Miss Thompson wasn't threatening her mother. She was attempting to address criminal behavior and offered a resolution that didn't involve law enforcement. That sounds like extortion, counselor. My heart sank. She'd already made up her mind. The judge granted a temporary restraining order. I was to stay 500 feet away from both my mother and sister pending a full hearing in 60 days. Any violation would result in my arrest. As we left the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Someone had tipped them off. Miss Thompson, is it true you threatened your mother? Miss Thompson, did you manipulate your grandfather? Miss Thompson, are you planning to step down from the company? I pushed through them without comment, but the damage was done. The footage of me leaving the courthouse, looking guilty and defensive, was on the evening news. The next morning, Morrison Industries canceled their contract. All 3 major clients were now gone. The company was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars every month. And it got worse. Brad had filed motions to freeze my access to company accounts pending investigation. The judge agreed to a partial freeze, meaning I couldn't make any major financial decisions without court approval. I was running a company I couldn't actually run. Banks started calling in loans, worried about the company's stability. Suppliers demanded cash up front, instead of the usual net 30 terms. The stock value of our publicly traded bonds dropped 35%. I was working 18-hour days, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on coffee and granola bars. I'd lost 12 pounds in 2 months. My hands shook from stress and exhaustion. And then Jason, my ex-boyfriend, gave an interview to a local blogger. Donna changed when she inherited that money, he said. She became obsessed, paranoid, pushing everyone away. I tried to support her, but she chose money over our relationship. I hope she gets the help she needs. Even he'd turned on me. My extended family, aunts and uncles and cousins I'd known my whole life, stopped returning my calls. At my grandmother's birthday party, which I attended before the restraining order, people literally turned their backs when I approached. "We don't want to get involved," my Aunt Susan said coldly. But Patricia is family, and families stick together. I wanted to scream that I was family too, but I just left. That night, alone in my apartment that I could barely afford because I hadn't taken a salary in 2 months to keep the company afloat, I sat on the floor and finally let myself cry. My grandfather had trusted me with his legacy, and I was watching it crumble. My family had turned me into a villain. My boyfriend had left. My reputation was destroyed. And the worst part? Even if by some miracle I managed to save the company and meet the profit target, Brad's lawsuit meant it might not matter. If they successfully contested the will, even if I did everything right, everything would go to Caroline anyway. Mr. Harrison called me at midnight. "Donna, I need to be honest with you. The judge in the will contest, it's Judge Williams, the same one from the restraining order hearing, but the motion to recuse was denied. She claims she can be impartial." I laughed, a broken sound. "So the woman who already thinks I'm unstable and threatening will decide if I manipulated my grandfather. That's perfect. There's more. Caroline's lawyers have found a witness, a nurse who claims she worked with your grandfather in his final weeks. She says you isolated him, controlled his medication, and whispered things to him when he was weak and confused. That's a lie. I never. I believe you. But she's willing to testify under oath. And Donna, she's credible. Former ICU nurse, clean record, sympathetic demeanor. A jury will believe her. My mother paid her. She had to have paid her. Probably. But proving it is another matter." I hung up and stared at the ceiling of my tiny apartment. The company needed at least $500,000 in the next 60 days just to make payroll and keep operations running. I had maybe 40,000 in accessible accounts. The rest was tied up in the court freeze. I was going to lose everything, and my family would win. 5 months into the year-long challenge, I stood in the parking lot of Thompson Manufacturing's main facility and watched 30 employees walk out for the last time. I'd had to lay them off. There was no choice. With 2 major clients gone and the 3rd about to leave, we couldn't afford the payroll. These were good people, many who'd worked for my grandfather for 15 or 20 years. and I had to let them go because my family was systematically destroying the company. A man named Tom, who'd been with the company for 18 years, stopped in front of me. "Miss Thompson, I don't believe what they're saying about you. Your grandfather talked about you all the time. He was proud of you. I hope you know that." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, fighting back tears. After they left, I walked through the empty facility. Machines sat silent. The floor where there used to be noise and life and productivity was now echoing and cold. My phone buzzed. Another news alert. A local reporter had picked up the story, and it was spreading on social media. "Greedy granddaughter destroys family company." The comments were vicious. She should be in jail. Gold digger got what she deserved. That poor mother. Imagine your own daughter doing this to you. Someone had found my personal social media accounts and posted my address. I was getting death threats. People were showing up at my apartment building, yelling at me, calling me names. I'd had to call the police twice. The lawsuit was escalating. Caroline's lawyers had deposed everyone who had ever known my grandfather. They were building a case that painted me as a calculating manipulator who'd spent years positioning myself as the favored grandchild while poisoning his mind against Caroline. The fake nurse, a woman named Linda Patterson, had given a heartbreaking testimony. She described in detail how I supposedly controlled my grandfather's pain medication, how I'd keep him groggy and confused, how I'd tell him lies about Caroline being too busy to visit when she was allegedly calling every day. None of it was true. But Mr. Harrison said her testimony was devastating. "She's good," he admitted. "She has medical knowledge, she seems genuinely concerned about elder abuse, and she has details that sound real. The judge is believing her." I was living in a cheap motel now, $28 a night, because I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. I'd put every dollar I had into keeping the company running. I was sleeping on a mattress that smelled like cigarette smoke and eating dollar menu items from fast food restaurants. I'd lost 18 pounds. My clothes hung off me. I had dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. My hands shook constantly from stress and too much caffeine and not enough food. Old friends stopped answering my calls. People I'd known for years, people I'd thought cared about me, had vanished. The social media campaign against me had worked. I was a pariah. Even Dorothy, my grandfather's loyal assistant, had given her notice. "I'm sorry, Miss Thompson, but with the layoffs and the uncertainty, I need to find stable employment. I have a grandson to think about." I understood. I didn't blame her. But it felt like another abandonment. The company was projected to miss the profit target by 23%. We were losing money every month. Even if I worked miracles, there was no way to turn it around in 6 months. And then, my father gave an interview. I was sitting in my motel room, eating cold noodles from a foam container, when I saw it on the local news. My father, looking distinguished and sorrowful, sitting in the living room of my childhood home. "I've lost both my father and my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "The daughter I knew died when greed took over her heart. I watch her destroying everything my father built, alienating everyone who tries to help her, and I don't recognize her anymore. I pray every night that she'll wake up and realize what she's become before it's too late." The interviewer nodded sympathetically. "And your wife and other daughter, how are they coping?" "Patricia is heartbroken. Carolyn cries every night. They both just want Donna back. They'd give up every penny of the inheritance if it meant getting the real Donna back, the girl we used to know." I threw the remote at the television. It bounced off harmlessly, but the gesture felt good. They were painting themselves as the victims, the loving family torn apart by one person's greed and instability. And America was buying it. The will contest hearing was scheduled in 2 months. Mr. Harrison was preparing our defense, but even he sounded defeated. "Donna, I think we need to talk about settlement options." "Settlement? If you agree to give Caroline the company now, they'll drop the lawsuit. You could walk away with your reputation partially intact, avoid criminal charges for the alleged threats, and move on with your life. Criminal charges? Brad is pushing the district attorney to consider charges of elder abuse and exploitation. It's a long shot, but with Judge Williams backing their narrative, it's not impossible. I could go to jail for trying to honor my grandfather's wishes, for trying to save his company. I sat in that motel room for 3 days, barely moving, barely eating, trying to decide what to do. On the 3rd day, someone slid an envelope under my door. Inside was a USB drive and a note written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Your grandfather knew this might happen. He prepared for it. Trust no one. Dash a friend. My hands shook as I plugged the USB into my laptop. The first file was a video. My grandfather, sitting in his home office, looking directly at the camera. The timestamp showed it was recorded 1 week before he died. "Donna," he said, and his voice made me start crying immediately. "If you're watching this, you're in hell right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for putting you through this. But I needed to know. I needed to know if you had the strength to fight for what's right even when everyone turns against you." He leaned forward. "I know about the embezzlement. I've known for 6 months. I have proof, all of it, on this drive. Patricia and Frank stealing from me. Caroline helping them hide it, all of it documented. I also know they'll try to destroy you. That's why I set this up the way I did." He smiled sadly. "The test isn't just about running the company, sweetheart. It's about character. It's about being willing to stand up for truth even when it costs you everything. Your sister would have taken the easy money and walked away. But you're a fighter. You always were." There were more files. Security camera footage from his house showing my mother and Uncle Frank in his study, discussing the embezzlement, laughing about how they'd been stealing from him for years. Audio recordings of them planning how to contest the will if he left anything to me. Emails between Caroline and Brad strategizing about destroying my reputation. And bank records. Detailed records showing my mother had paid Linda Patterson, the fake nurse, $50,000 to testify. Proof that she'd bribed employees to quit. Evidence of every dirty trick they'd pulled. The final file was another video message. "Donna, you have everything you need now to destroy them. Send them to prison. Take everything. Make them pay. But here's the real test. Will you become them to beat them? Or will you find another way? The choice is yours. I trust you to make the right one. I love you, sweetheart. Make me proud." I watched the videos 3 times. I had everything. Evidence that would not only win the lawsuit, but send my mother and sister to prison for years. Evidence that would vindicate me completely. But using it meant destroying what was left of my family. It meant sending my mother to jail. It meant ruining Caroline's life completely. I thought about what my grandfather said. About character being tested in fire. I called Mr. Harrison. "I have evidence. All of it. Everything we need to win." "That's incredible. When can I see it?" "Tomorrow. But I want to try something first. I want to give them one more chance to do the right thing." "Donna, that's not one more chance. If they refuse, then we use everything. But I have to try." I knew it was probably stupid, probably naive, but I couldn't become what they accused me of being. I had to try to save them from themselves, even if they'd been trying to destroy me. It was the biggest mistake I'd made yet. 6 months into the year-long challenge, I sat in the courtroom for the will contest hearing. My mother and Caroline sat across the aisle, both dressed in conservative black suits, both looking like grieving family members fighting for justice. I'd tried to meet with them before the hearing. I'd sent messages through their lawyers asking for one private conversation. They'd refused every time. Brad's response had been clear: "See you in court." So here we were. Their lawyer, Frank Garrison, stood up to present their case. He was good, smooth, sympathetic, painting a picture of a vulnerable old man in his final days being manipulated by an ambitious granddaughter. "Ladies and gentlemen," Garrison said, "this case is about elder abuse, pure and simple. William Thompson was a brilliant man, a self-made success. But in his final months, he was weak, confused, and vulnerable. And Donna Thompson took advantage of that vulnerability. He called witness after witness. Distant relatives who claimed I'd kept them away from my grandfather. Neighbors who said they rarely saw anyone but me visiting him. And then, Linda Patterson, the paid nurse. She was perfect. Sympathetic, detailed, credible. She described my grandfather's decline, how confused he supposedly was, how I allegedly controlled his environment and his medication. She talked about times she supposedly tried to let Caroline visit, only to have me intercept and send Caroline away. Judge Williams ate it up. I could see it in her face. She believed every word. When it was our turn, Mr. Harrison called me to the stand. "Miss Thompson, tell us about your relationship with your grandfather." I took a deep breath and told the truth. About working in his factory when I was 16, sweeping floors and learning the business. About family dinners every Sunday where he'd tell stories about building the company from nothing. About visiting him every week, even during college, even when I was working 2 jobs and barely had time to sleep. "Did you isolate him from his family?" Mr. Harrison asked. "No. He isolated himself. He was disappointed in how they lived, always taking, never building anything themselves. But he still loved them. He wanted them at every holiday, every birthday. I never kept anyone away." "Did you manipulate him into changing his will?" "I didn't even know he'd changed it until after he died." I could see the jury didn't believe me. The damage had been done. Then Mr. Harrison said, "Your Honor, the decedent anticipated this contest. He left something for the court." He pulled out a laptop and queued up the video. The courtroom went silent as my grandfather's face appeared on the screen. "I'm making this recording," he said, looking directly at the camera, "to prevent my daughter Patricia and granddaughter Caroline from stealing what I'm leaving to Donna. I am of sound mind. I know exactly what I'm doing. My physician, Dr. Robert Chen, can confirm I have full cognitive function. I had him examine me specifically for this purpose 3 days ago." He leaned forward. "Patricia, Caroline, if you're watching this in court, you should be ashamed. I know about the embezzlement. I know about the $2 million you stole from me over 5 years. I know about your plans to contest this will. I know everything." My mother's face went white. Caroline grabbed Brad's arm. "I'm leaving my company to Donna, because she's the only one in this family who understands the value of building something instead of just taking. She's the only one with integrity. And I'm setting up the 1-year test, because I need to know she has the strength to fight for it." The video ended. The courtroom erupted. "That's fake," Patricia screamed. "He was senile. He didn't know what he was saying." Judge Williams banged her gavel. "Mrs. Thompson, sit down." Mr. Harrison introduced medical records from Dr. Robert Chen, confirming that my grandfather had been examined 3 days before making the video and was found to be in excellent cognitive health. Then he played the security footage. My mother and Uncle Frank in my grandfather's study, discussing the embezzlement. Audio of them laughing about how easy it was to hide money from the old man. Patricia tried to leave. A bailiff blocked the door. Mr. Harrison showed the bank records, proving the payments to Linda Patterson. He showed emails between Caroline and Brad plotting my destruction. He showed everything. The courtroom was in chaos. Judge Williams called for order, but reporters in the gallery were already on their phones. "Your Honor," Mr. Harrison said calmly, "we request this contest be dismissed immediately and request the court refer the evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and perjury to the district attorney's office." Judge Williams looked shaken. "The will contest is dismissed. This court will recess while I review the criminal evidence." As we left the courtroom, reporters mobbed us. My mother was screaming about fake evidence and conspiracy. Caroline was crying, real tears this time. Brad was on his phone, probably calling his malpractice insurance carrier. I felt numb, vindicated, but numb. Mr. Harrison put his hand on my shoulder. "You won, Donna. It's over." But it wasn't over. My phone rang as I was walking to my car. The number was from the Illinois manufacturing plant. "Miss Thompson, You need to come now. There's been a fire. I drove 90 miles per hour to the plant. Smoke was still rising when I arrived. Fire trucks everywhere. Police cars. Investigators. The plant manager met me at the gate, his face covered in soot. How bad? I asked. Total loss. The main production floor, the equipment, everything. $3 million in machinery destroyed. My legs went weak. Was anyone hurt? No, thank God. It happened at night. But Miss Thompson, the fire marshal is saying it's arson. Someone disabled the sprinkler system and poured gasoline throughout the building. I looked at the smoking ruins. 40% of our production capacity gone, and without it, there was no way to meet the profit target. None. Even with the legal victory, I was going to lose the company. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have taken the deal. Now you lose everything anyway. -C. Caroline. Even from jail, she'd found a way to destroy me. The burned factory smelled like chemical smoke and failure. I stood in the ruins at 2 a.m, crying for the first time since this nightmare began. Not quiet tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that I couldn't control. The fire marshal had confirmed it. Arson. Someone had systematically disabled safety systems, spread accelerant, and lit it up. Security footage showed a person in a dark hoodie, face hidden, moving through the plant like they knew exactly where they were going. The insurance company was already making noises about investigating whether I had somehow burned my own factory for the payout. Another gift from my family's smear campaign. Even if insurance eventually paid, it would take months. I had 5 months left to meet the profit target. Without this factory producing anything, without the ability to fulfill orders, I couldn't make money. I couldn't meet the challenge. I pulled out my phone and called Mr. Harrison. I'm done, I said, my voice hoarse from crying. They've won. Even with the lawsuit dismissed, I can't rebuild in time. I failed Grandpa. Donna, don't make any decisions tonight. You're exhausted and in shock. Let's meet in the morning and discuss options. What options? The company is dead. Caroline gets everything anyway, just like she always planned. Maybe I should just call her and surrender. Sleep on it, please. I hung up and sat on the curb outside the burned building, watching the last of the smoke drift into the night sky. Thought I might find you here. I looked up. My father stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking old and tired. What do you want? My voice was flat. Can I sit? I shrugged. He sat next to me on the curb, both of us staring at the ruins. I'm sorry, he said. I laughed, a broken sound. Little late for that. I know. I've been a coward. I knew what Patricia was doing. Not everything, but enough. The embezzlement, the sabotage, the lies. I knew, and I said nothing because I was afraid of her. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of losing my comfortable life. Why are you telling me this now? He pulled out his phone. Because Caroline called me tonight. She was bragging. She paid her cousin to burn the factory. She wanted me to know that even with the lawsuit gone, even with criminal charges coming, she'd still won. She'd destroyed you just like she planned. He handed me the phone. A recording of the call. Dad, it's done. The factory's gone. She can't meet the target now. Everything comes to me anyway because she'll fail the business conditions. We'll deal with the criminal stuff later, but we won. That bitch thought she could beat us. I listened to Caroline's voice, so full of triumph, and felt something inside me shift. I have more, my father said. I've been documenting everything for 3 months. Every conversation, every plan, every lie. I was too weak to stop them, but I recorded it all. Proof that Caroline hired the arsonist. Proof that Patricia bribed witnesses. Proof of everything. Why? Because you're my daughter, and I forgot that for a while. I forgot that family isn't about blood. It's about doing right by the people you love. Your grandfather knew that. That's why he chose you. He handed me a USB drive. This is everything. Names, dates, recordings, bank transfers. The arsonist's identity and proof of payment. Everything you need. We sat in silence for a moment. I know I can't undo what I've done, he said. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. But I can help you finish this, if you still want to fight. I looked at the USB drive in my hand, then at the ruins of the factory. I can't rebuild in 5 months. Even with evidence against Caroline, I still fail the business requirement. She gets everything by default. Then don't rebuild. Find another way. I looked at him. What other way? You're William Thompson's granddaughter. His blood, his fire. There's always another way. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with Mr. Harrison and the company's financial advisor. I have 1 month before we're completely out of operating capital, I said, and 5 months before the deadline. I can't rebuild the factory. So what if I don't try? I'm not following, Mr. Harrison said. The challenge is to increase company profits by 10%. I've been focused on production, on maintaining what Grandpa built. But what if the way forward is to change what we are? I pulled out my laptop and showed them the analysis I'd done at 4 a.m. We have 3 options. Option 1, declare bankruptcy and liquidate. Caroline wins. Option 2, sell the company to a larger competitor. We lose everything Grandpa built, but I technically meet the profit requirement through the sale. Option 3, merger. The financial advisor leaned forward. A merger? There's a company, Thompson Manufacturing's main competitor, owned by a woman named Sarah Thompson. No relation, just coincidence. She's been trying to break into our markets for years. What if we merged operations? Combined resources, shared infrastructure, maintained the Thompson Manufacturing name but with new leadership structure. Mr. Harrison frowned. That's incredibly risky. You'd be giving up control. But I'd meet the profit requirement. The merged company would show significant profit increase through combined operations, and I'd preserve what Grandpa built instead of just selling it off for parts. Would she even consider it? Only one way to find out. Sarah Thompson agreed to meet me that afternoon. Her company, Mountain Ridge Manufacturing, had been trying to acquire us for years. She was about my age, maybe a few years older, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. I heard about the fire, she said. I'm sorry. Thank you. Look, I'm going to be direct. I need a merger, and I need it fast. You've wanted access to our client list and our patents for years. I'm offering them, plus the Thompson Manufacturing brand name, in exchange for keeping the operation alive and meeting a specific profit target by year-end. What's the catch? My family burned down my factory to make me fail. If I don't meet the profit requirements in 5 months, my criminal sister inherits everything anyway. So I need this merger to work, and I need it done fast. Sarah laughed. You don't mess around, do you? I don't have time to mess around. All right, let me see your books. We worked for 3 weeks straight. Lawyers, accountants, endless meetings. Sarah drove a hard bargain, but she was fair. The merger would give me 35% ownership, her 65%, but the combined company would be worth more than Thompson Manufacturing alone. And the profit projections showed we'd hit the required 10% increase. The board meeting to approve the merger was scheduled for 2 weeks before my deadline. I needed 3 of 5 votes. 2 board members were loyal to my grandfather's vision. 3 were Patricia's people. You'll never get their votes, Mr. Harrison warned. Then we get new board members. That requires a shareholder vote. Then we call one. I spent 2 weeks tracking down every small shareholder my grandfather had ever given stock to. Employees who'd received shares as bonuses. Suppliers who'd taken stock as payment. Family friends who'd invested in the early days. I called them all personally. Explained the situation. Asked for their support. I worked 22-hour days, living on coffee and determination. I lost 3 more pounds. I looked like a skeleton, but I kept going. The shareholder meeting was a circus. The 3 board members Patricia controlled fought every procedural move. They claimed the merger was a betrayal of my grandfather's legacy. They argued I was selling out, but the small shareholders remembered my grandfather. They remembered what he stood for, and they voted to replace all 3 board members with people who supported the merger. The new board approved the merger unanimously. I collapsed in my chair afterward, barely able to process that we'd done it. We'd actually done it. But then Sarah Thompson called me the next morning. "Donna, we have a problem." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "National Manufacturing Corp just made an offer for Mountain Ridge. $50 million. My investors are insisting I take it. But the merger would be void. NMC doesn't want Thompson Manufacturing. They just want Mountain Ridge's patents and facilities." "I'm sorry, Donna. My hands are tied." I hung up and stared at the wall. 2 days before the deadline, and the merger was dead. I'd burned every bridge, pushed every limit, and I was still going to fail. Mr. Harrison came to my motel room that night. "There's one option left," he said. "Sell the real estate portfolio. 2 of the commercial properties are worth enough to show the required profit on paper. But that guts the company. Grandpa built that portfolio over 30 years. It meets the technical requirement of the challenge. You increase profits by selling assets. He wanted me to grow the business, not cannibalize it." "Then what do you want to do?" I thought about my grandfather's final video, about his words about character and strength, about building something that matters. "I want to do it right, even if it means losing." "Then you're giving up?" I looked at him. "No, I'm going to try something crazy." At 11 p.m., 36 hours before the deadline, I called an emergency meeting with all remaining Thompson Manufacturing employees. 42 people showed up at the shuttered Illinois plant. "I'm not going to lie to you," I said, standing in front of them in jeans and a hoodie, looking nothing like a CEO. "We're out of options. The company is going to fail, and it's my fault for not being strong enough, smart enough, or fast enough to save it." Tom, the 18-year veteran I'd had to lay off months ago, raised his hand. "That's bull, Miss Thompson. Your family sabotaged you at every turn. You did more than anyone could have expected." Others nodded. "I appreciate that. But here's the thing. I don't want to save the company by selling off what my grandfather built. I want to save it by doing what he would have done, building something real. So I have a crazy idea." I pulled out the restructuring plan I'd worked on all night. "What if we turn Thompson Manufacturing into a worker-owned cooperative? You all invest your severance pay, your savings, whatever you can spare. In exchange, you get equity, real ownership. We restructure as a smaller, leaner operation, focused on quality over quantity. We cut overhead, we focus on niche markets, and we build something sustainable." The room was silent. "I know it's crazy. I know it's risky. But I also know my grandfather didn't build this company for the money. He built it for you, for your families, for the community. And I think if we work together, we can save it the right way." Tom stood up. "How much do you need?" $500,000 to restructure and show the required profit by tomorrow at midnight. He whistled. "That's a lot." "I know. And I understand if you—" "I'm in for $20,000, Tom said. "It's my retirement savings, but screw it. Your grandfather gave me a job when no one else would. Time to return the favor." Another person stood. $10,000, $15,000, $5,000. One by one, they committed. Employees, former employees, suppliers who'd worked with my grandfather for decades. By midnight, we had $450,000 pledged. We were still short. And then my father walked in. "I'll cover the rest," he said. $100,000. "And I don't want equity. I want you to succeed because you're my daughter. And I should have said that 6 months ago." We worked through the night. Lawyers drafted papers. Accountants ran numbers. At 11:45 p.m. on the final day of the challenge, with 15 minutes to spare, we filed the paperwork. Thompson Manufacturing, restructured as a partial worker-owned cooperative, with new capital investment of $500,000 and projected profit increase of 11% through operational efficiency and new contracts from former clients who'd agreed to return. At 11:59, I emailed the final documentation to Mr. Harrison. At midnight, my phone rang. "You did it," Mr. Harrison said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "You actually did it." I collapsed on the floor of the factory office and cried. But this time, they were tears of relief. 6 months after that midnight deadline, I stood in my grandfather's office at Thompson Manufacturing headquarters. The company was thriving. The worker ownership model had transformed everything. Employees who had equity stakes worked harder, cared more, and came up with innovative solutions I never would have thought of. We'd won back all 3 major clients. Our quality scores were the highest they'd been in 5 years. We'd hired back most of the laid-off workers and were planning to expand. The office looked different now. My grandfather's old photos were still there, but I'd added new ones. The 42 employees who'd invested in the company, all of us standing together in front of the rebuilt factory. My father helping to paint the new employee break room. Tom shaking hands with a client who'd returned. A knock on my door. Mr. Harrison walked in, carrying a large folder. "The final judgments came through," he said. I took the folder and opened it. Patricia, convicted of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. 4 years in federal prison. Caroline, convicted of embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and arson. 3 years in federal prison. Brad, disbarred permanently. Facing additional charges for legal malpractice and witness tampering. Uncle Frank, 2 years in federal prison after cooperating with prosecutors. They start their sentences next month, Mr. Harrison said. I closed the folder. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, but mostly, I just felt sad. "My mother called me last week," I said, "from jail. She screamed at me for 20 minutes about how I destroyed our family. Then she cried and asked why I couldn't have just given Caroline the company and avoided all this." "What did you say?" I said I loved her, but she destroyed the family herself when she chose money over her daughter. Then I hung up. Mr. Harrison nodded. "And your father?" "He's been going to therapy. We have dinner once a week. It's awkward and painful, but we're trying. He's been helping at the factory, actually. Turns out he's pretty good with numbers when he's not letting Mom run his life." "And you? How are you doing?" I looked around the office. "I'm good. Really good. The company is worth more now than when I inherited it. The employees are happy. We're building something real here, something that matters. I think Grandpa would be proud." I know he would be. After Mr. Harrison left, I pulled out the final letter my grandfather had left. Mr. Harrison had given it to me the day after I met the deadline, but I'd been too overwhelmed to read it. Now, sitting in his office, I finally opened it. "Donna, if you're reading this, you won. Not because you made money, but because you understood what wealth really means. I didn't build a company. I built a family of workers who depended on me, and I never let them down. I knew you wouldn't either. The others only saw dollar signs. You saw people. That's why you'll succeed where they failed. I'm sorry for what I put you through. I knew it would be hard. I knew they'd attack you. But I also knew you needed to be tested, not because I doubted you, but because you needed to prove it to yourself. You needed to know you could stand in the fire and not burn. You're stronger than you think, sweetheart. Stronger than me, even. You took my company and made it better. You took my vision and expanded it. You understood that real wealth isn't about accumulation. It's about what you build and who you lift up along the way. I'm so proud of you. More proud than I could ever say. Now go build something beautiful. Love always, Grandpa." I wiped tears from my face and looked at the photos on my wall. My grandfather smiling at a company picnic. The employees who'd invested everything to save his legacy. My father, trying to rebuild our relationship. My phone buzzed. A text from Jason, my ex-boyfriend, asking if we could get coffee and talk. I deleted it without responding. A minute later, another text, this time from David, one of the engineers at the company. "Still on for dinner tonight?" I smiled. "Absolutely. 7 p.m.? Perfect. David had been there through the worst of it. He'd seen me at my lowest, exhausted and broken, and he'd never wavered. He'd brought me coffee during all-night work sessions. He'd helped me rebuild the factory. He'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That was worth more than $12 million. Extended family members had started reaching out, apologizing for believing the lies, asking to reconnect. I was gracious but careful. I'd learned that lesson. Family isn't automatic. It's earned. My phone rang. Tom, the 18-year veteran who'd invested his retirement savings. Miss Thompson, got good news. Morrison Industries wants to double their order. Said our quality is the best they've seen in 10 years. That's fantastic, Tom. Also, the team wanted me to tell you something. We took a vote. We want to rename the building after your grandfather, the William Thompson Production Facility. Thought you should know before we order the sign. I couldn't speak for a moment. He would have loved that. We know. That's why we're doing it. After we hung up, I walked to the window and looked out over the factory floor. Workers moving with purpose, machines running smoothly, a company that was building something real. I thought about everything my grandfather had taught me, about resilience and character, about understanding that wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the lives you touch and the legacy you leave. I learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who stands with you when everything falls apart. I learned that worth isn't inherited. It's built one decision at a time, one choice to do right, even when it's hard. I learned that sometimes the hardest fight isn't against your enemies, but against becoming like them. My mother and sister chose revenge and greed. They chose destruction over creation. I could have done the same. I had the evidence to destroy them even more thoroughly than they tried to destroy me. But I chose differently. I chose to build instead of destroy, to lift up instead of tear down, to create something lasting instead of just claiming what I thought I deserved. My sister got $12 million. I got wisdom. I got a company that means something. I got employees who trust me. I got self-respect. I got proof that I could stand in the fire and come out stronger. I know which inheritance I'd choose every single time. The sun was setting through the office windows, casting golden light across the photos of workers and family and legacy. I looked at my grandfather's picture and smiled. "We did it, Grandpa," I whispered. "We built something beautiful." And for the first time in a year, I felt genuinely at peace. The road had been brutal. The losses were real. My relationship with my mother and sister might never be repaired, but I'd found something more valuable than any inheritance. I'd found out who I really was and what I was capable of. I'd learned that true wealth isn't what you inherit. It's what you build with your own hands, your own heart, your own choices. It's the people you lift up, the values you uphold, and the legacy you create. My grandfather didn't just leave me a company. He left me a test. And by passing it, I didn't just win an inheritance. I earned something far more valuable. The knowledge that I could face the worst and still choose to be better. That's a gift worth more than all the money in the world. Now, I have a question for you. If you faced a choice between easy money and hard-earned respect, which would you choose? Have you ever had to stand up to family when you knew they were wrong, even though it cost you everything? What does real wealth mean to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that character matters more than cash, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people, facing impossible choices, and finding the strength to do what's right. And share this with someone who needs to hear that being tested by fire doesn't destroy you, it proves what you're made of. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that the hardest paths often lead to the most meaningful destinations, and that who you become matters more than what you gain. May you always have the courage to build something beautiful, even when everyone tells you to give up.